Next, we've got a great friend of us. We're honored to bring Tim Arenik, paramedic, firefighter, and longtime EMS coordinator for the City of Las Vegas Fire Department, to talk about the mass shooting.
Now, the last 12 as the EMS coordinator for Las Vegas Fire and Rescue. And so today I want to share with you, I'll give you an oversight. We have some excellent slides of the shooting itself, and the lessons we learned from it, and really how we start looking at, changed our thoughts of how we look at planning MCIs now. So the shooting occurred at an event called Route 91 Harvest Festival. It's been in Vegas for 4 years. It had taken place over 4 days, and the shooting occurred on the last night of the event, where there were 22,000 people in the venue that night. October 1st, 2017 is when it occurred. It changed things, the way we looked at shootings, and changed some SOPs that we'll go over a little later. At 9:18, Mandalay Bay Security got an alarm that one of the fire escape doors on the 32nd floor was open. And if you remember, we had the big MDM fire where most of the people died in the stairwell in the 80s. So a big deal for us in our fire prevention. The security went guard up to check out why the alarm had activated. They had surveillance, the door was shut, they didn't know why the alarm was going off. So the security guard, their protocol is to come up from the bottom floor instead of taking the elevator just to see what was going on. He was unable to open the door because the shooter had screwed the door shut, because the suite and the exit for the fire escape was right, that door was right there. This would literally be his only mistake he would make in the shooting, because I don't have the picture, they won't release it, but there's a screw that goes in and hits a wire on the emergency door that set the alarm off. And because otherwise, if this doesn't happen, and I'll show you in a couple of pictures that later, that we wouldn't have found him for 15 plus minutes. Because looking at a casino at night, even with muzzle flashes, is hard to tell what level the casino is, so we kind of thought of breaking it back then. But the shooter had screwed that door shut and put surveillance cameras down the hallway, so he knew when the police were going to come in and attack him. So the security guard went up a different stairwell, and when he was coming down the stairs, this is where the shooter saw him and started to fire a couple rounds at him, and then started shooting into the venue. And for the next 10 minutes, he'd fire 1,050 rounds of ammunition. He had 3,000 rounds total in his hotel room. I don't know if the FBI report should come out soon, but they're basically going to say that they have no reason why he did this. There was no, they didn't find, they put, I think, like 1,000 agents on it to try to find a motive. There's no terrorism manifesto. We're never going to know why it actually occurred. And at the end of it, we would have 800 patients, 422 people would be shot. So he had a 50%, almost a 50% hitting of people. And 58 people would be killed, 59 if you count the shooter who committed suicide. We would transport 250 patients, just the private ambulance and the fire departments, within 2 hours. That we have no idea how many people were self-transported to the hospital. So Las Vegas Valley is 4 major full-time departments that integrate with automatic aid. They're dispatched from our fire combined center in Las Vegas Fire and Rescue. We dispatch for Clark County, our city, and North Las Vegas. So it's all an integrated system. It's 4 departments that function as one. The event actually happened in Clark County, but this total response of numerous chiefs from all jurisdictions, a total of 161 fire department people in those jurisdictions responded. That doesn't count all law enforcement, security in the casinos, all the private ambulances that responded. We have 3 private ambulance companies, Community, AMR, Medic West in our city also. So this is what the venue looks like the night before This is a picture as it's starting, the bands are starting to warm up and people are starting to move in. The venue is a block long, about a half block wide. And real quick, he shot at these fuel tanks, I'll show you later, but this picture really shows a good view. Those are jet fuel tanks for Executive Terminal in McCarran Airport that he tried to blow up. So Mandalay Bay is kitty corner to where the venue was. So to recap, Mandalay Bay is where the shooting occurred. The venue is kitty corner. Luckily, our command post would be a fire station number 11, which is also our police substation is connected to it. So good location, far enough away from the shooting to set up a good command post. So the circle, you see the little dot in the middle? That's where he was shooting from. So imagine if we don't have that alarm go off from that elevated 3,000 rounds total, we would never, we would have taken at least 15. That would be the best, searching floor to floor to floor to floor to find out where he was shooting from. Because as you know, especially in Vegas, you look at one window, that's usually like the 4th or 5th floor. So kind of caught a break there. This is what it looked like with 22,000 people. That one block by half block is wall-to-wall people. So the FBI was able to get some, put together audio from multiple sources of social media and recording. So this is kind of a condensed version of the shootings in 1 minute. But the important thing here is the first start of the shooting is really captured well on this recording. It's 110 shots, and you'll be amazed if you haven't looked before how fast.
You leave that one. Sorry about that. This is for the TV.
All right, double stereo. Do I sound better now? Okay. That helped. So what I want you to really pay attention to, though, is I'll show you another video of these 110 shots where people weren't even aware it had happened. And if you haven't trained with, one of our best experiences about 5 years ago was we trained with our police department with blanks. And when you actually see how fast active shooter events happen, it's amazing to you on what little you can do in the very beginning. So pretty amazing how quick that was going. He had a bump stock, and an AR-15 is the first one that's firing, but just incredible how fast it goes. So these are his lines of sight. The icon where the Route 91 is, where most people were killed because they were all condensed in a garden area. And you can see that I showed you earlier, there was actually a couple rounds into the fuel tank. It's jet fuel, it's hard to ignite, it's like kerosene. You're unsuccessful in doing that. This video is just an outstanding view of, he had AR-15, AR-10s, which have about a 450-yard range. The green area is going to do a flyby for you. The green area is where he actually shot, but the red area is where he could have actually kept firing as people were dispersing. So you can see by finding him and kind of interrupting his plan in 10 minutes, if that hadn't happened, this would have been a lot more tragic event. And we never trained for an elevated shooting, so it was something that we had to go back and rethink of how much ground he could actually cover. So I showed you the 110 shots before. This is a Facebook video of those 110 shots. You will hear ricocheting. You will hear what people say was gunfire initially and then realized it was automatic fire. Once the shooting stops, there's a little gap in there, then people start screaming. I mean, before you even hear screams and people being physically shot, the shooting is over. So if you take away one thing from that video, these happen quick, and you're going to have patients in those central areas with severe injuries because of it. So what happened, though, was people now these days, right, they kind of know the active shooters. They kind of realize gunfire is going on. We've taught them to run, hide, fight. Well, what do you do in an open venue, right? I'm running. There's nowhere to hide. There's no bushes in here. So people started dispersing and took from what we had always trained in the box scenario active shooter and made it a 4-mile scene for us with people walking around with gunshot wounds and thinking that they had been shot elsewhere, and they were actually just dispersing from the venue. And if you remember Mumbai in 2009, for the first 20 minutes I was in our dispatch center helping our EMS command from our dispatch center. This is what it sounded like, and I'm going to speed it up a little bit, but initially we thought we had a Mumbai incident because people were going back to their casinos for help with gunshot wounds walking in, and security were activating their active shooter protocols based on that. But for about 20 minutes, we had calls all over the place.
If you heard reports from bystanders that they saw somebody go into an RV directly across the street from where we're at, wearing fatigues and a black duffel bag.
Claim 6, be advised we're getting reports on Mandalay Bay. The top of Mandalay Bay has a bar. We currently have another active shooter fix. I've reports that there's an active shooter at New York, New York. And
We have reports of active shooters now at Hakkasan and New York, New York. I have not
We
confirmed
now
that.
have reported an active shooter report on the shopper being fired at FGM as well. Shots fired at FGM.
Emergency traffic. We have people on the roof of the Tropicana, at least 2 people on the roof of the Tropicana.
Emergency traffic, shots fired in the Tropicana. Shots fired in the Tropicana.
From North Brand, reporting shots fired in Hollywood, and I see
Active shooter at the airport location. Active shooter at 33rd and 34th floor on fire.
Reporting shots fired in New York.
So it took some discipline, and one of our things we had worked on and identified in our training was sending people like myself and other chiefs to dispatch centers to interpret all the information, because sometimes it's hard for the IC because he's still doing his tactical things and he's not hearing everything clearly. We started to realize, like, New York, 15 minutes in, we got a call for a traumatic injury, a gunshot, a stabbing. There were just all these weird calls going on, so it kind of made us rethink, this is not a Mumbai style, this is people actually clearing away from the event. So it was able to de-escalate the police department, which we had a good relationship with, to call them and say, look, this is what we think's going on, and they were able to focus back on the venue. That night in our dispatch center, though, we got lucky again in this shooting. Originally, this worked out perfect for us in some aspect from an EMS fire agency. It happened 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, which is literally our slowest time in Las Vegas. It happens on a Friday night at 10 o'clock, we're screwed, because all our research, we're busy as heck on that. 4 dispatchers were there initially, but it happened we changed shifts at 10:30. So the dispatchers going off, the dispatchers that came on, we were able to put 10 dispatchers up to handle 8 radio channels just for fire and EMS. We had 70 to 60 calls on hold at a time in our 911 center. And in that 2 hours, there'd be 780 calls to 911. Our average is, I think it's like 1,000 a day. So, and this just shows the map of when we finally dispersed most people. Most of the dead, like I said, was around that icon. You can see there's dots on the airport. People were literally going wherever they could. They jumped fences. They were literally running on an active runway. And the flight controller's like, is somebody on the runway? And they had to shut down the airport. The plane had to actually do almost touch and go. So people are going to go all over the place. Expect that. There's 16 hospitals in Las Vegas. So this was a big thing that we had never taken our MCI plan further deeper into the hospital, which we'll talk about in a little bit. There's 3 trauma centers. There's 2 level 2s and 1 level 1. They would see as a combination 639 patients in the hospital. And to a testament of our trauma centers, because it is Vegas, we're kind of experienced in shootings. We get a lot of them. Only 14 people would die that arrive with gunshot wounds. So the other aspect that helped a lot too is our 2 trauma centers were within 6 miles of the shooting. So actually crews were able to transport patients and return back to the scene. Because Vegas, if you have never really looked at it too, sits on an island. St. George, 2-hour drive, or Rialto is probably our next closest help. It's about, 3-hour drive from Vegas. So we're able to turn people and transport all those 250 people by using additional resources. So this timeline for hospital is important that we learned. This is Sunrise Hospital. They're the level 2 trauma center that you probably saw on a lot of pictures of blood down the hallway. I know there's a lot on social media and stuff. They did a phenomenal job because they were the closest trauma center, and people would Google and they would drive there. So the first patient by private vehicle and then transported arrives about 5 minutes after the shooting, or I'm sorry, 20 minutes after the shooting. Administrator, so they have a supervisor, but they don't have an administrator on at that time of the night. So it took some time for the administrator for the hospital to come in and make command decisions for their hospital. Their triage means that they call it, co-triage means they call everyone back that can possibly come back into the hospital. Everything shifts around so they can move patients, more beds down to it's a big plan on how to get more help into their ER. At the end, they would have about 100 physicians, 200 nurses. And then by 1800, they're done and over with. So the event lasts, only about 18 hours. That's one thing you learn with active shooter in these type of events. They're not like a natural disaster or something. They happen quickly, you have to be ready for it, and they de-escalate just as quick as they started for fire and EMS. So how do we handle in our little island 800 patients, 422, and transport 250? It is a testament that 9 years ago, our police department came to us and asked to integrate services. And it's about that relationship with all your stakeholders, especially your police department, to do training with them, to know it's not about our old traditional, you're going to take my job, you're going to do my job, or, it's about lining up with police and fire and integrating. This is my responsibility, this is what we're going to do, this is what the police is to do, not a fight of who's going to have more authority on scene. MACTAC stands for Multiple Assault Counterterrorism Action Capabilities. It's an integrated, multiple discipline coordinated, which means that's what we worked with. We worked with all these agencies. What is going to be your responsibility in an active shooter event before it happens? And then we trained over and over on it. And it was fun. I'll tell you, for the first year, the trainings were funny. Cops would go one way, medics would go one way, we'd have a dummy there, they'd miss a dummy. But we went in with the spirit of, we're gonna learn from every drill we do. And like I said, it worked up to when we had it finally fine-tuned We did the active drill with live blanks and everything, and it went so smooth that nobody was rattled because we had defined our responsibilities on events like this. And I'll talk about the FEMA study that just came out in August, but I just wanted to emphasize that was a key point in the FEMA study, release of the active action report, was that we had integrated with police departments well before and had done training, and everyone, because of that, the unified command and everyone knowing their place and what their capabilities were and how we could integrate really saved a lot of lives that night, a ton of lives. We didn't get an exact number, but we think there were about 45 tourniquets applied, and in the past we all know those would have been dead patients. In fact, we didn't have enough tourniquets, that we'll talk about later, that people wanted them because we had trained even the police department on how to use them, and they had them in their cars. So what were the lessons, the big lessons that we learned? Staging, right? The unified command system was activated. We had that command post. The police department was there, fire, everything was perfect. We were calling resources. Using our medical alarms and all that, but what was happening is those people were dispersing as our crews were coming in. And our incident commander would call a medical alarm, which would bring 5 private ambulances, 5 fire department transport units, and they weren't getting there. And part of that reason was they were coming up on people that had minor gunshot wounds, and they were picking them up and putting them in their ambulances because we had not specified enough in training that for the greater good, your transport has to pass those patients up. And you have to train on that. It's a hard discipline for any ambulance personnel, EMS, to say, oh, I'm passing a gunshot in the ankle or something. But you have to train. Every time you do any kind of training now, we throw that kind of discipline in. Make sure that, or you tell the incident commander that, hey, I came into a critical patient. I'm not reporting to staging. That was another thing that we hadn't trained on. Communication, right? So you could argue this one a little bit. Outside agencies, kind of a lot of people, the Mandalay Bay had their own resources. The police and fire did pretty good, but we hadn't really expanded to other stakeholders, like our private ambulance company kind of went off on their own. They had trained with us, but not at a really intense level, and called a lot of outside resources on their own. But this was kind of on that borderline of a disaster versus an active shooter. There were so many patients. So that might just happen in an event like that. Accountability. If anyone in this room has a great idea, you'd be a millionaire, because I don't know how you count for 400, and it's just not quite there yet. They're working on that. Do you barcode somebody, print a barcode on their forehead, or there's a lot of discussion on how we do that. Hopefully someday we'll have the technology to put wrist on and scan, because I will tell you this, as much as I know from my position, it's a pain in the ass to try to, write down people's name and everything. At the end, when families trying to look for victims and find out if they're laying dead in the venue or have been transported to the hospital, it's one of the greatest community you can give back if there's a way you can track patients. So work on that. Oops, sorry. So we do training all the time, right? We've done tabletops. I'm sure you guys do the same thing. What we find, or we found out, is every time we get a different supervisor from community ambulance or private, or we get a different stakeholder from the hospital, and we didn't really know who those stakeholders were that night. We hadn't given those people a way to identify, is this the right person in the command post? Does he have the authority? Is he the supervisor? Is he the executive? So work on your liaison, identifying who makes what decisions. This was interesting. When we went back and looked at the training that we were doing, right? My level, we would do all the tabletops. We'd all come in here, we put up a scenario, right? Everyone thinks what they would do. And when you look back at the tapes, the incident commander wanted to do something else, but the branch directors were seeing something else. It was kind of like the NFL these days with the incident replay. You see one thing and you think the replay official sees something else. You need to, we're kind of having fun with it now. We'll bring in a captain, and he'll start the scenario in the tabletops. And he'll guide the beginning of the tabletop, because it gives that more effective training on what's this level thinking, and then incident commanders make a decision based on that feed of information. If you've tried to run 2 radio channels in your lifetime, it's not easy. I would not think you guys have the same problems I do. I ride by myself, so I always grab a paramedic on scenes like this, because I know I can't listen to the radio channel and try to make EMS branch decisions. That's kind of always been our thing, but in the incident command, they found that using the 8 radio channels, which communication we all know in every event you read is a big issue, that there was, even if you try not to as a branch manager or an incident commander, you still hear those channels off in the background. So try to limit the noise on there and trust the people that are listening to each radio to talk to the incident commander, instead of you as an incident commander trying to filter all that noise at once. And we suggest we put into our command post after that earbuds, because a lot of people come in with portable radios and they can just put it in and then they're in and out. So again, do we even need to talk about this? Communication on every event seems to always be an issue, right? It just discipline the best you can be, but like I said, in events like that, there's going to be a lot of radio traffic, but try to minimize them the best you can. So I talked about how close the trauma centers were, right? We, for Vegas, a long time, had pre-collection areas. Does anyone have those predetermined areas in town where they send victims, like minor victims if you have an MCI? Okay, we have 4 areas, our Thomas and Mack, our Cashman, big areas in these events that we had pre-planned, and it's a great idea and it works well to minimize off the hospital to send minor patients. But the problem is, they only found this out if they called 911. If they called 911, we answered and said, oh, I've got a minor scratch or I fell. Okay, go to the Thomas and Mack. So we actually, a couple months after the shooting, the Department of Interior came and talked to us about that, and they're currently working on an app that will allow dispatchers to hit every social media platform. So Google SOS, Instagram, Facebook. There's no ability to do that right now, and it's not to tell people initially kind of what's going on. The thought is just, if you've been injured, somewhere our dispatchers can type in, if you're injured and it's minor, go to this location, because the hospitals got overwhelmed because everyone will Google search where to go, and hopefully someday we'll have that platform, because that's what everybody was doing, was using Google to go to Desert Springs Hospital, which is the smallest hospital in Las Vegas. I mean, and then Sunrise Trauma is a level 2. They did an outstanding job of treating patients, but again, their parking lot was full, and we're lucky in Vegas, we always have sunshine and clear skies, so nobody's in the snow or anything, so it works. But trying to get them to an area, if you have a gymnasium, somewhere you can send minor patients and then send units over there to take care of them, will help a lot. This was the breakdown. The breakdown of what we hadn't trained for was supporting our hospitals. Desert Spring Hospital, like I said, was overwhelmed. They didn't call, they didn't know what to do. They could have called us. On that Sunday night, I could have diverted some additional paramedics over to help them triage patients and move patients to the level 1 trauma center. So we're working with them right now. There's a big committee on, what do we do? How do we support them? We don't have the answers for that right now, because there's also laws about going into hospitals, grounds, and treating patients, and we're working on that, but you need to at least start thinking of that. If you have small hospitals and you have an active shooter, are they going to get overwhelmed? And if they do, what do? Do you bring units, off-duty personnel? Does the hospital have a plan? Start working with them, because you're going to have to support them in some aspect. with events like this. The side benefit is, at least patients end up, you can kind of fudge the numbers and, oh, that patient got transported by Rescue 11. But you have to be ready to upstaff quickly because, like I said, this event technically for us was over in 2 hours. We had transported everyone. The venue had been secured and done in 2 hours. So what did we do? We took 22,000 people, 800 people, and dumped them into the hospital. And now, it was done for us, but it wasn't nearly done for the hospitals. So this, if you have, has anyone read the after action report yet? It's a really good read. I'm pretty impressed how they put it together. It's not a lot of mumble jumble, like a lot of action. It just has over 70 observations, they call them. It's not a tool to tell you what to do. It's a tool to start you thinking on what we learned and how you can improve your programs. But the key things that we've been talking about is if you don't have cross agencies where you've trained with hospitals, police, any stakeholder that you think is important to an MCI event, they won't go well. That's not the time to figure out who's in charge of applying tourniquets and what's the police gonna, do they know where triage and treatment is to bring patients to you? Understanding what we do for each other was pretty much the whole read of the after action report, but I picked out a couple things that I thought would be relevant for me to talk to you about. That night, right, there's 22,000 people. There's tons of firefighters, EMS, nurses, doctors, that all love country music in the middle of this venue with gunshots all around them with no tourniquets. And we had a first aid tent. We have requirements for events like this. The private ambulance handles a first aid tent, but they didn't have enough tourniquets or any tourniquets to help for the firefighters or other people to start using. The police department actually has these throw kits in their vehicles too, but all the police units that were there, their cars were 2 blocks away, so that they weren't able to go get that. So now we've come up with just basically a bin of these throw kits that have tourniquet pressure dressings, and they'll sit somewhere where anyone that's in venues can actually help and put them together. This was interesting. We found out all the training we've done for years and years and years, right? Metro Police Department is dispatched separately than fire and EMS. And we had never really integrated their police dispatch center into an MCI drill. We always did it on our side, and that was kind of a weakness that the police department did a great job, but they didn't really have a plan and an event of this magnitude. So they're working on a policy and training their dispatchers like we are in ICS 100 and 200. Again, I already talked about this, but there were a lot of people there that could have applied tourniquets, pressure dressings, and it's just something we got to think about, having those tools available around for them. Even we go in as a force protection team with our police department. There's 3 cops in the beginning in a V formation and 2 medics behind with just tourniquets, decompression and pressure dressings. And we go in and just treat life-threatening injuries. We have 10 tourniquets. The problem was our guys were also saying, well, I need those because I'm going to have to, we thought it was going to buy. So just have more of these stop the bleed kits available to personnel. Our private ambulance company providers, who surprisingly we work with all the time in our drills and stuff, kind of got rogue a little bit and didn't enter our incident command system. Again, you got to remember, there's all these ambulances that are trying to get to the central core, and there are people running into them. So there was a lot of miscommunication on how many ambulances they had, what they were doing. If you're in this scenario with private companies, we really reined in after this that, you work for us, we're the incident commander. We have to work as a team because we have to know, A, how many ambulances are available, and so if we have to double transport, it just goes back to that cleaning up logistics of what resources you have available to you. So make sure you have those partnerships well developed.
So, how many of you train active shooter events in a box? Is that all your training? Anyone ever done it in an open field? Ever? Like a playground or? We hadn't. This is our hostile MCI protocol on how we're going to manage patients and treat patients. And you can see in the paper it looks great, right? Everyone's coming right through and I'm standing right here. Oh, you're green, you're yellow. Doesn't happen when people are running in other casinos. We actually had 3 EMS medical branches set up separately with triage treatment because it was so broad and wasn't the perfect scenario. We're trying to figure out, you know, but that's what had to happen that night. But now we're changing this policy because your active shooters may not be in this box style that we've all trained for. This school, this high school, you know, this was not that. It was an open venue, which changed the game dramatically. So how long? I've been in EMS for 30 years, and just recently we started doing active shooter MCIs, but pretty much I think you would all generally agree we've generalized MCIs our entire career, right? We have high-rise plan, we have apartment story fire plans, single-story residence, and then we have MCIs. So it's time to start looking like we're looking at all MCI events are not the same, right? We had actually changed our model in the last couple of years in training to start worrying about blast injuries. We kind of were anticipating there was more likely of bombs going off, which we all know those are harder to control than shootings. Shootings now, you know, somebody gets shot in the leg, you put a tourniquet on, they're no longer a red patient. They can sit in triage for 4 hours, which was a hard, you know, it's a hard thing, but it works. But we have to remember that they're not the same. We have the ability to train or write policies based on each event now, and we should start doing that. Like natural disasters are going to be long events. They're going to have a lot of different stakeholders. There should be a different policy than just saying, hey, there's a tornado coming, we got a bunch of people, now it's an MCI. Especially with these active shooter events or plane crashes or these events that happen quickly and then they're over. If you don't have those resources lined up before they happen, you will be way behind the game. And that's how we treated and transported so many patients. We had a policy on if there's an active shooter, these are the resources that are coming. They're defined, and they're going to be the right resources for that type of an event. And that proved to help a lot. So plan for each. Start trying to plan for each MCI as you think might happen in your community and write a policy and get stakeholders involved. You must engage in stakeholders before events happen. There's no excuse to these days not to engage everyone in your community, politicians, whoever you think based on the event might be a resource for you. Because when it comes to the unified command, first of all, those stakeholders need to know what unified command is, where they go, and they helps if they're been in a drill before, you have face-to-face, you know who they are. You also need to, like we had problems with our private ambulance where we thought we had defined those responsibilities quite well. We hadn't defined them well enough. You know, who was going to bring us, like Red Cross, for example, right? We call Red Cross every day for a fire, but when we called their dispatch on this thing, they're like, they didn't know what to do. They're like, how, what, how many people? That would have been a good time to know the president of the Red Cross in Las Vegas and have a direct line to his cell phone and say, hey, this is bigger than your dispatch center, you know, and he would have started the ball rolling instead of their dispatch. So engaging responsibilities, knowing what the capability of those stakeholders are, this will work for you, and this is what we're developing in our dispatch, is a playbook of resources. If you don't already have it and have agreements in place and who to get contact with was essential in these kind of events. So go off the shooting a little bit. Say you need a crane for an auto extrication or a rotator or something, do you have an agreement in place? Do you know who you're going to call? Do you know have you written down that you're going to be the priority if you call them and they're going to come right now? And that will help you when you start diversifying MCIs into unique responsibilities. You'll know those type of agreements that you need. And you never know, once you have it established, if you need it on something else that's right there for you. This happened again at 10:30 on a Sunday. It's the lowest staffing for the hospitals. So we had never, anybody get up at 10, do training at 10, 12 o'clock at night with the department? I've never have. And so this is something that we're trying to figure out, and we're being lazy too. Either the night shift people have to come to training during the day with us, or we have to suck it up one day and do this kind of training we've been doing the day with the hospitals. You have to do it with the night shifts too. Can't exclude them. And middle management, right? Like I showed you in the video, there was not a hospital administrator on staff because there's usually no reason for it. So the poor person that was in charge of the ER that night was extremely overwhelmed because we just had never given the opportunity to train with them. And here's what we're doing, here's what we're going to call, here's what it means when we check in and ask how many beds you have. So, and we learned this a long time ago, and now we're just really hitting it harder. If you're going to put the time together to do an active shooter or a big MCI drill, don't just do it in your department. Invite other people to it because they see things we don't see. We have a lot of tunnel vision. Hey, this is the way we've always done it. Even, the normal layperson sometimes will be like, why do you do that way? And it might spawn your memory to be, oh, I don't know, this is the way we've always done it, but that might be a better way. And learn from everyone. We did a lot of training with our politicians just to see, so they could see what we were doing. It was a good community thing, but they had a lot of good questions for us that drove our policies. Do you guys have behavioral health going on? Good. There's a lot of my friends that were at Ground Zero, this was a war zone. It really was. The hardest thing they had to do that I've never really had to do in my career was there wasn't enough law enforcement left to separate their loved ones holding on to dead loved ones in the middle of the venue. And they said that was the hardest to tell them that, hey, you gotta leave. The body stayed there for almost 36 hours because there's so many and such a big crime scene. So we had to do a lot of debriefing with people. If you don't have this ready, we have a reference list already in our fire department. We've done it for a long time where we just hand people, here's the information. If you need more, let us know with resources. And the best thing you can do that we did a long time ago is go out and find counselors that know firefighters and paramedics and law enforcement, because we are the best manipulators at counseling. Go in there and we don't like them, we'll tell them exactly what they want to hear. So we found some people that would call our people's bullshit and say, nope, you look messed up, you're going to stay here. And that was great because that's what we need sometimes to ask. When we ask for help, we need somebody to push us over the edge. They did set up formal meetings every couple weeks where people could come and go, and just remember that this scar could last. It can come out right away or it could come out a year later. People come, some people just needs to be short and sweet. Some people will talk when they come to these meetings and some people just need more time, but as long as you give them those resources and those vetted resources, a lot of people got help after the event. So the after action, I can bring that up or I can email you. It's kind of a weird link to try to find. It's a good read. The NFPA just came out with 3,000. Did anyone read this provisional standard yet? It's a okay template to get you rolling. I don't know why NFPA is starting to dip into EMS stuff, but I will tell you that I went to a class last month on this, and a lot of the fire department chiefs were mad that NFPA was combining active shooter and hostile event, because they're actually two different, they could potentially be two different events. And the comment was either do one, an active shooter and a hostile event, or call it, you know, something, just one thing. Like their standards, you know, they don't say high-rise / apartment building. So, and I'll leave you with kind of a wrap-up of what happened that night.
What is the essence of the emergency? Metro Central again, Mandalay Bay. We have an officer down north now, Mandalay Bay also. Okay, officer down at Mandalay Bay? Yes, north now. Can I help you, okay? Where are you at, dear? Okay, where? Are you with anybody that's been shot? DOA, what's the location on that?
12 critical. Extremely critical.
Okay.
Rapid transport out of here.
Okay.
Rapid transport. We're trying to put them on the back street of this thing. Just Kyle Street or whatever the hell it is, Reno.
You're on Reno and where?
Battalion 2, Engine 11, looks like you just passed us. We were right next to the concert when it started happening. It sounded like full auto fire.
All personnel, I'm in front of the Excalibur right now, trying to deal with Metro and locate a lieutenant. Go ahead and get your map check gear out, be ready to move.
We got shots fired at 4:15 a.m. Route 91, sounded like automatic firearm.
Copy, come right in. 169 Sammy, they have shots.
What's going on, Sammy? Coming from upstairs. In the Mandalay Bay. Upstairs, Mandalay Bay, halfway up. I see the shots coming from Mandalay Bay. Halfway up. Stroll 361, I see him, multiple orbit race.
So to recap real quickly, just the real important stuff is build those relationships as soon as possible and define those responsibilities, especially with law enforcement. We need to get that a standard around so we all integrate. That's why everything went really, really well, and we were very comfortable interacting during a hostile event like that, because it took our medics a long time to say, hell no, I'm not going in there with gunfire. And we kind of like, well, you run into a abandoned building and more people die in that. So to get them buy-in, but then do those trainings so they're comfortable on these events. And start looking outside the scope of how other stakeholders can help us in events like this and get resources for us. We didn't need to, but for example, you know, where are you going to get medical supplies if you have a shooter like this in the middle of the night? Do you have a place to go? Do you have a town somewhere else if you're rural? And practice like it was the real thing, and practice like the Rialto said earlier, you know, with a passion, and do it right. That's the link for those. I'll leave it up there for a second. And I thank you. Any questions? I'll be happy if we have time. I don't even know. We have time? Okay. So, any questions? Oh, another great presentation. All right. Well, if you do, feel free to ask.
We actually have one of our firefighters who, that's okay, just, he had first-hand experience with an active shooter. He was a firefighter in Florida, school shooting. So he probably can relate to some of the issues that we've experienced, but I don't want to put you on the spot.
Well, I mean, you could back up, either and again, this isn't slowing down. Since this shooting, there's been 4 shootings where there were 10 or more fatalities in 2018. So it's not that, a definition of a hostile shooting by, I think FBI, could be wrong, Homeland or one of those, is 3 or more patients. Well, that happens every weekend in Vegas, so, but it's escalating to more and more victims, and I don't know why that is, but, if you don't think it's gonna happen in your town, Google active shooter events, and you will find that they're more or less in unknown parts of town. I mean, I didn't even know where Sandy Hook was until that happened. So you need to be prepared for these events. They're not going to stop, unfortunately. Yeah. Anything you learned that was different?
No, it's just literally, like you said, it's a matter of time.
Yeah, it's fast. I mean, for us, it ramps up fast and it's down fast. So be ready for it. Have it planned out before. Okay. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
And again, once again, it's my pleasure to introduce a man who needs no introduction, especially today. You've certainly heard from him, and you're going to hear a lot from him tomorrow. The EMS chief from the Salem Fire Department, Joe Powell.
All right, thank you. You guys hear me okay? Yeah, okay, very good. So we talked a little bit about cardiac arrest survival, and we're going to talk more about it, a lot more about it tomorrow. So let's talk a little bit about what we can do in the trauma setting to save some more lives. So I don't make a boatload of money from Pfizer or Lilly or any other drug companies, and Zoll's not shipping me money. So that's my disclosures. I have to be at work Monday morning, Chief. I'll be there Monday morning since nobody's sending me money. Monday's fine? All right, so what's the problem? What are we trying to solve here? We're losing too many patients in trauma, right, to bleeding. So the problem sort of is that we're okay with that. We've been losing too many patients to hemorrhage for too long, and we accept it. It's the norm. They're going to bleed out, nothing we can do. Let's dump a bunch of fluid in them, get their blood pressure up, take them to the hospital, they're going to die. And we're going to go, okay, there's nothing we can do about it, right? So traumatic injury is a leading cause of death, disability among those 1 to 44 years of age. So they got a lot of livable life left. Among trauma victims, 30 to 40% of mortality is from bleeding, all right? And it's probably one of the most reversible causes.
Now stand aside, worthy adversary. 'Tis but a scratch. A scratch? Your arm's off. There is. But what's that then? I've heard worse. You lie. Come on, you pansy.
Little Monty Python reference for you? Anybody? Luckily some of you are older, right? You know Monty Python. It's only a flesh wound. Who said that? Extra point back there. All right. So we know what the problem is. So who's to blame for this problem? I'm not sure if I'm in a blue state or a red state, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's this guy. Is it his problem? It's his fault? No? Maybe it's this guy's fault? It's probably your chief's fault, right? It's my chief's fault. If I got to blame anybody, I just blame Chief Grayson. It's his fault. And that way, but agree with me, yep, it's Chief Grayson's fault. It's the rich people's fault. They got all the money, right? They can do what they want with it. Or maybe it's the poor people's fault because they don't have the money to pay for it and we can't subsidize them. It's a corporation's fault. If you work for a private corporation, they want the money, it's stockholders, blah, blah, blah. We're letting them die because of them. But this is my favorite. This is across the board, United States wide. The problem, everybody's problem. This is the cause of it right here. It's the endotracheal tube. Right? And we've got to blame the tube. It's the tube's fault, it's the tube's fault, it's the tube's fault. Because this little piece of plastic is dangerous. We would have had some here to show you, but they're too dangerous. Right? So it's the tube's fault. We'll talk a lot about the tube and whether it's tube fault or not tomorrow too, but unfortunately, it's on us. It's on every one of us that accepts that this is the way we always do things. This is the way we should continue to do things. People are going to die. Right? I've been a medic since '89. Anybody born after '89? Zoll told me I couldn't cuss, so I won't say it. And we've been doing the same thing, same way, same process, losing patients. That's okay with us. It's not. We got to fix it. We got to think differently. If I teach you anything in the next 2 days, I want you to teach you to think differently. I want you to question everything. Are we getting the outcomes we want? Please don't tell me yes, and we're going to continue to do it. It's not acceptable. Go do something else for a living. Right? So I debated whether to put this slide in here because it's kind of rude, but I left it in so you guys can be mad at me if you want. But the problem is not that people are uneducated. The problem is that they are educated just enough to believe what they have been taught and not enough to question what they've been taught, especially in our system. Right? We have a top-down system. You do what you're told. Right? Especially a fire suppression system. Do what you're told. Right? You get rewarded for doing what you're told every day. Maybe we shouldn't be doing what we're told. So let's talk about the problem. So this is the DO2 equation. Anybody recognize the DO2 equation if you ever taught it in school? This is how we deliver oxygen to the tissues. DO2 is delivery of oxygen. Simply hemoglobin times saturation, or oxygen, times cardiac output makes delivery of O2, right? Cardiac output's made up of heart rate and stroke volume. There's also preload and contractility and afterload after stroke volume there, but this is it. So we can do a little bit here, right? We can control an airway, give the patient oxygen. We can do a couple things there in trauma. We can do a few things here, but not a lot. We could give dopamine or something, right? The biggest problem, also here, if we're talking about, we can put some needles in people's chests, right? One of the leading causes of death in trauma. But one of the biggest causes is here with hemoglobin loss, right? What's hemoglobin do? Carries oxygen, right? So if I need to get this remote to Portland, it's north of me, right? Thank you. I got to have somebody to pick it up, right? That's me, hemoglobin. I got the remote, right? The remote is the oxygen or saturation. Cardiac output is when I get in the car and take it to Portland, right? But if you don't have me, it's never going, right? Nobody's picking it up and taking it. So we got to deliver oxygen to the tissues. And the only way we can do that is by maintaining hemoglobin, right? Okay, you haven't told me anything I don't know, Joe, right? There's our problem, right? Where's the hemoglobin? Not in the patient, where it should be, right? Am I wrong? That stuff is supposed to be in the patient. But we're okay with it not being in the patient, or being in the patient's belly or chest, right? But not in their circulation. This is from Vegas, I think, sir, Tim, right? So I'm asking a question. How do we increase hemoglobin loss? How can we do it? IV fluids? Okay. How else can we increase hemoglobin loss? How could you do it? What? Not controlling the bleed? Okay. So increase heart rate would increase cardiac output, increase hemoglobin loss. Increase vascular pressures also known as sometimes called blood pressure, mean arterial pressure. Increasing blood pressure increases hemoglobin loss. That's a problem because what do we all do? We got to get their blood pressure up, right? I got to get the pressure up, got to get the pressure up, got to get the pressure up. I don't want to deliver them to the hospital without good pressure. I don't want to call the MSTN or the base hospital and tell them they got a crappy pressure. We got to fix it. I got to increase the pressure. Increase stroke volume, which increases cardiac output and hemoglobin loss. Increase the size of the injury or don't fix it, right? If I could shoot him again or something, right, we'd make more hemoglobin loss. Or don't fix it, don't take him someplace that can fix it. Obviously, that's a problem. Dilute clotting factors. If I had a way to dilute clotting factors, would that increase hemoglobin loss? Okay. Decrease peripheral vascular resistance, core shunting. How would you decrease peripheral vascular resistance? Decrease core shunting. Get their pressure up, right? Give them some fluid, get their pressure up. You're going to decrease core shunting, and depending where the injury is, you're going to increase their bleeding. So getting the pressure up is not the freaking answer, by the way. There may be a point where you can't perfuse a brain any longer, and then you got to do something to bridge that gap. But across the board, it's not the answer. Administer an anticoagulant. If you gave him Coumadin, that'd screw it up pretty bad, right? That's how we increase hemoglobin loss. How do we accidentally increase hemoglobin loss in the field? Anybody? Oh. What is this? Anybody over 40? Know what this is? It's mask suit. We used to put these on people. And so who used to use them? So you guys are all old, by the way. Did your patient improve after you put them on mask suit, or they get worse? They got better, right? They got better. LOC got better, blood pressure got better, pulse rate came down, skin signs got better. My patient's going to live. Except we know what happened. They didn't live, right? More people died long term because we put them on mask pants. Made sense to us, looked right, because it increased what? Hemoglobin loss across the board. Also some acidosis and other crap, but didn't work for us. So IV fluids. What do IV fluids do for us? Increase pressure, decrease peripheral vascular resistance, decrease core shunting, and dilute the clot. You want to kill somebody, dump a bunch of fluid into them, get their pressure up, break up the clot, and they'll be dead. They will look better short term. That's how we do it almost anywhere, everywhere in the nation, right? Blood pressure. Please tell me we're not continuing to say I need to get my patient to a number. We are not still there in medicine where a number makes a difference. Perfusion makes a difference. Perfusion of what? So how do I tell? If you're not going to give me blood pressure, Joe, what are you going to give me to tell if I'm perfusing my patient well enough to get them someplace and keep them alive? LOC? Right? Are we perfusing the melon? That's the only thing I give a crap about. Are you perfusing the melon? It's going to shortest amount of time. I said crap, by the way, Terry. So, do we need a blood pressure of 90? Come on, right? Predominantly, you're going to call up and somebody's going to say, give them fluid till they get a blood pressure of 90 and bring them to the hospital. Does everybody's blood pressure stay, is it the same? The guy that's 180 over 110 initially and now he's 130 and he's got a pulse of 140? Does he need a different care than the lady that's normally 90? And she's now 90? Right? Come on, we don't do that anymore, right? So, permissive hypotension, leaving your patient hypotensive for a period of time so that you can get them to a hospital. You don't increase blood loss, you don't increase hemoglobin loss, you're still perfusing the melon. I'd measure the melon. So this is so I was in a meeting probably 5, 6 years ago now, probably 6 years ago, where we were rewriting the trauma protocol in my county. And of course, we were talking about the basic protocol, which is 2 large bore IVs wide open, right? So everybody's protocol for trauma. And what do? Say, hey, excuse me, why are we still doing this? Why are we still doing this? How about we don't put that we have 2 large bore IVs wide open in our trauma protocol? And so they looked a bit like this, right? Like, oh my God, you want to do what? They said, we can't do that. Why can't we do that? Because we've always done it that way. You want to take that out of the protocol? I do. 6 years ago. This is our protocol currently. And you can see warm IV fluids may be a problem, by the way, with core shunting. Because it lessens core shunting. Start a second IV. If they're unstable, give them up to 2,000 cc's. Today, that's my protocol. We spent 6 years doing the TXA trial study. I still have that protocol in the books. Because we've always done it that way. We've always done it that way. So, after a little while and after this meeting, I'm like, we got to make some changes. I don't care what we do, but we got to do something different than what we're doing. So what do? So I put it out to everybody I know, all the people that are sharper than me, which is a lot of people, by the way, and I say, hey, what do we do? What do we do here? And a friend of mine says, hey, you might try this drug. And this is my reaction right here. I'm like, oh, you're shitting me. You're kidding me. A drug? I'm looking for something that replaces volume, that carries oxygen. I don't need a freaking drug. Dude, I thought you're smarter than this. He said, look at the data, man. Look at the data. Go back and look at the data on TXA. All right, I'll take a look. So we'll get back, look at the data, and say, really? The data's pretty impressive. Everybody know what TXA is? You know how it works, right? It blocks the enzyme that breaks down the clot. I could go into the clotting cascade with you, which would make you nauseated after about an hour and a half of going over that whole process. It's complex, to say the least, but it basically blocks the enzyme that breaks down the clot. So if you don't know it yet, you're in the clot management business, right? You're either building clots in trauma, or you're breaking down clots or trying to get clots broken down in stroke and MI. You're in the clot management business. So, all right, let's see what we can do with TXA. So I looked at the data, and here in the data, this is the CRASH 2 study, and I'm not going to read this all to you, but this study is out of the UK, right, and another bunch of other countries, but it's across the pond. 40 countries, 274 hospitals, 20,000 randomized trauma patients, determined by GCS, systolic BP below 90, and the type of injury. They all got TXA. So half of the 20,000 were treated with TXA, showed a 32% decrease in mortality, 32%, by death due to bleeding when given within 1 hour from time of trauma. That's relative, by the way. That is of all the patients that died. So I'll show you the actual number, but 21% decrease in mortality when given to patient under 3 hours. 30% increase in mortality when the medication is given after the 3-hour mark. So there may be some selection bias here. In other words, if the patients didn't get TXA for more than 3 hours after their injury, they're probably nowhere near a trauma center or an EMS system. And so that may be part of this increase in mortality after 3 hours. Hard to tell, but maybe a little what we call selection bias in that process. But the bottom line is nobody's going to get TXA after 3 hours, right? You don't want to give your patient a 30% decrease in mortality, right? Or increase in mortality. That's a CRASH 2 study. This is the MATTER study, the military study in Afghanistan in their Bastion Roll 3 hospital, I believe it is. They, 1,000 patients, 1,000, half got TXA. TXA patients showed a 30% decrease in mortality. Other interesting thing here is that the patients that received more than 10 units or more had a 50% decrease in mortality due to bleeding, right? Those are relative decreases, by the way, not statistical decrease. Now, this is a pretty healthy population. Right? These are all relatively young, in shape like me, young males, mostly, some females, but mostly males. And so the question kind of begs, well, did it work better because they were young and healthy? Or would it work in the 80-year-old patient that fell down the stairs? We're not sure, but. So both those studies showed the earlier you give TXA, the greater the survivability. The earlier you give the drug, the greater the survivability. So who's got the option to give the drug the earliest? You do, right? Both these studies were in-hospital studies. So the question really begs, well, will this work in the pre-hospital environment? So there's two sides of that argument. One side of that argument is if it works across the threshold of the hospital door, it should work on the other side. The other one is, hey, we got to do a study to make sure that's the case. It's not always the case. So we got to do something here and see if it worked for us. So how do we decrease hemoglobin loss? Tourniquets? I think, where'd Tim go? Tourniquets work well in Las Vegas. You got to watch this, right? Because what we've looked at, what most of the results here are, is that we've looked at in the military guys are using tourniquets with great success, right? And so what's the answer to us? We put all the stop the bleed kits out. We say this is great. We should, tourniquets are going to make the difference. And in the right situation, tourniquets can be very valuable. They don't mean everything, right? So the wounding patterns here in a civilian environment are different than the wounding patterns in a military environment. Now, Vegas is a little bit different. Well, why is that? In the military environment, people are shooting back. In the civilian environment, they're not. So Chief Grayson talked about the San Bernardino terrorist attack. All of those patients that were fatal and were called on scene were close range, long rifle headshots. So tourniquets aren't going to make a bit of difference in those patients. So just keep an eye on your wounding patterns and what you take from other disciplines. Permissive hypotension, let your patient be hypotensive if they need to. Replace it. Yeah, if you can replace hemoglobin. So we looked at this. We said, well, maybe we can get O neg, right? O negative, universal, we can give it to everybody. The cost is relatively high for O neg. Everybody wants it. So it's the one blood type that everybody wants, so it's relatively hard to get. It's got a shelf life. So I don't remember what the shelf life was, but it was 90 days or something. Anybody use blood replacement product? We looked at some volume expanders. We looked at some artificial oxygen carrying solutions. None of them were FDA approved except one for animals, right, in veterinary medicine. So we didn't have a lot of options there. Build or stop the breakdown of the clot. Well, that's the option, right? Let's build the clot. Let's stop the bleeding. First question in your mind is, though, if we build the clot, am I going to build clots other places? Am I going to cause MIs? Am I going to cause strokes? Am I going to cause PEs? Am I going to cause other problems? And I'm going to kill those patients. It's a good question. We'll talk about it. So we can cut on it, right? Those people need surgery at some point. Stop the bleeding. No tourniquets around the neck. That doesn't seem to work very well. It doesn't limit cerebral perfusion. Neurologic outcomes are terrible when you put a tourniquet around the neck. It's a joke. It's funny. All right. So we decided we want to do TXA, right? We want to do a pre-hospital study on TXA. And so I take it to my medical director and said, hey, I want to do this. And about 4 or 5 days later, he's like, after sending him all the literature, he's like, all right, I'm in. We take it to our local EMS agency. Said, hey, we want to do TXA. And they said, dude, first time I'm a paramedic, right? So Right? They gotta pat me on the head because I'm short. I'm like, nice, Joe. Right? There's no proof that giving TXA early has any improvement in outcomes. That's the only thing the proof is, right? That's where all the proof is that the earlier you give the drug, the better the patient does. But being a good little paramedic, I asked if I could get some help from the doc, and if he could look at all the data for me and interpret it, because I'm not that sharp. And he did, and said, hey, we're in, okay? So then you got to write a protocol, a policy, do training. We made a video, took it to our state EMSA, went through the politics and the money and the egos, and eventually got TXA in the units. So the California Pre-Hospital Antifibrinolytic Therapy Study was born. I should never name something that's larger than I can say. So the study goals were to determine if pre-hospital administration of TXA in trauma patients with signs of hemorrhagic shock provides for a statistically significant decrease in mortality, total blood product used, and total estimated blood loss without a significant increase in thromboembolic events. Complications. That's a study, right? That's what we want to do. So it's a multi-center prospective observational cohort study. So San Bernardino, Riverside, and Alameda counties. Napa came in really late and had a few patients. 8 level 1 and level 2 trauma receiving centers, all IRB are approved. 30 pre-hospital providers, public, private, air, and ground. Nobody was excluded necessarily. Pre-hospital TXA group had 362 patients, and the control group had 362 patients on purpose. Right? So we're measuring 24 and 48-hour mortality, 28-day mortality, amount of blood products used, length of the ICU and total hospital stay, number of thromboembolic events, right? We want to know. Are we making people better? Are they living longer? Are they having strokes, MIs, PEs from this process? So the inclusion criteria patients should be included if they blunt or penetrating trauma with signs and symptoms of hemorrhagic shock. Blunt or penetrating trauma with signs of hemorrhagic shock. So that's the way I wanted it to read. I didn't get there, by the way. So we had a lot, because there was a lot of people to make happy in the process. There's a lot more criteria here. This made sense though, right? Blunt or penetrating trauma, signs of hemorrhagic shock, they should get TXA. Do we need to know more? Probably not. But we got to put parameters in there. Systolic blood pressure of less than 90 at the scene of injury. I hate this, right, because I don't like blood pressure as a measurement tool, except in cardiac arrest. Might be a really valuable tool in cardiac arrest. We'll talk about it a little bit more tomorrow. I know that sounds backwards, but during ground medical transport or on arrival to the designated trauma center, any sustained or blunt or penetrating injury within 3 hours, right, because it's got to be earlier than 3 hours. Patients who are at risk, considered to be at high risk for significant hemorrhage. This is all part of the inclusion criteria. Estimated blood loss of 500 mLs in the field, accompanied with a heart rate of greater than 120. So those are all kind of things we allowed to be put in there so that everybody would be happy so we can move the protocol forward. Bleeding not controlled by direct pressure or tourniquet. Major amputation of any extremity above the wrist and above the ankles. Okay? Exclusion criteria, any patient under 18, because we couldn't do the study on kids, although there's no data whatsoever that shows TXA is not effective in children. They use it in pediatric surgery, they use it in pediatric dentistry. Drugs have been around about 30 years, FDA approved. Any patient with an active thromboembolic event, so if you're currently having an MI or stroke or PE, you don't get TXA. All right, makes sense. Any patient with a hypersensitivity or anaphylactic reaction to TXA, you need a contraindication to there so everybody's happy. Any patient more than 3 hours post-injury, that makes sense because we'd heard them. TXA given twice. So once in the field, 1 gram, 100 cc's over 10 minutes. And once in the hospital, 1 gram, 100 cc's or 1,000 cc's, I don't care, over 8 hours. as soon as possible, but no later than 3 hours after injury. Second by the trauma receiving center, which means you had to go to a trauma center. They had to be included in our trial study. And it's 1 gram over 8 hours. Okay, so 2 doses. $724 patients in the final analysis. Now we just published this paper September. I think it was September that we published the final outcomes paper. We published a paper a year and a half, 2 years ago that we didn't have enough patients for it to be statistically significant. We didn't have a big enough p-value. So that paper proved that we could give it safely under the parameters shown. That the decreases in mortality and that other stuff was all in that paper, but we needed to have bigger numbers, so we had to wait until September to publish this paper. 362 people in both groups. The TXA and the control group were matched for injury severity scores, blunt penetrating injury, age, gender, and mechanism of injury. You got to make sure the control group looks a lot like your TXA group. It was a little bit difficult because we pulled the original control group at random and matched the ISS scores. We had a much higher blunt injury than we did penetrating injury in the control group that we pulled. And so we had to go back and pull a different control group. You start doing that, they start asking you whether you're cherry picking the control group, right? You're making up the control group because it's not at random anymore. But if we did it the other way, the blunt trauma group was too high. A little difficult, but we got there. The control group was seen in the prior 5 years, June 12 to June 17, with no significant changes noted in pre-hospital trauma care throughout this time. So shouldn't be any real confounding factors there. So this is the results from the study. 24-hour survival, 3.6% mortality, right? TXA group, 1.9% mortality. So 1.7 relative decrease in mortality, or 47%. Now the p-value here is 0.17. Everybody know what a p-value is? Don't make me explain what a p-value is because it's a pain in the ass. But it basically asks, is there enough patients in the study to make it statistically significant? Right? So if we did it with 1 patient and they lived, we'd have 100% decrease in mortality, right? So you have to do it with enough patients, and you have to have enough difference in those outcomes to make it statistically significant. So that's an extremely simplistic explanation of the p-value, but any p-value over 0.05, under 0.05 is considered statistically significant. 48-hour survival. Control group, 4.4, mortality. TXA, 2.2% mortality. 1.6% relative decrease, 36% decrease. Still not statistically significant. P-value is not less than 0.05, but it's still a decrease, right? We're going in the right direction. 28-day mortality. Control group, 8.3% mortality. TXA group, 3.6%. 4.7% decrease in mortality. 57% decrease with a p-value of 0.0075. It's definitely statistically significant. 28-day mortality. Interesting, because you think the drug would only have effects up to its half-life, about 8 hours. So we'll talk a little bit more about this, but not 100% sure why 28-day mortality is such improved with TXA. So blood products used, we measure blood products used. In the control group, they got 3 units. TXA group got 1 unit, 2% reduction. Probably can do the math there. 66% reduction in blood product used. P-value 0.0001. Statistically significant decrease in blood products used in TXA patients. Time in ICU. Control group, 5 days. TXA group, 4 days. 1 day reduction in ICU stay. Or 20% decrease in length of stay. P-value 0.004, so it's also statistically significant here. Total hospital stay. Control group, 8 days. TXA group, 4 days. 4-day reduction. Anybody want to do the math? 50% decrease, right? With a p-value 0.001, 0.0001. Also statistically significant in decreased hospital stay for those folks. So we tried to do some sub-analysis here and look at some of the different things that I try to tease out some of the smaller items here. Patients that received 10 or more units of blood, 24-hour mortality, 36% decrease, 48-hour mortality, 46%, 28-day, 63%. So the sicker the patient, the better they do on TXA. Same thing in the MATTER study, right? And then we looked at the military study, the MATTER study, sicker the patient, the better they did, or the biggest decrease. So we looked at 2 doses versus 1 dose. So why would a patient get 1 dose and not the second dose? So they got it in the field, but at the hospital didn't feel it was necessary. Okay? So in the 2 dose versus 1 dose, there was a change in the blood products used, so it was increased by 3 units. They got 2 doses, they used 3 more units. So probably because people that got 2 doses were sicker, right? They definitely got the second dose in the hospital because they definitely met the inclusion criteria. Some of the 1 dose folks didn't. So that's what we think that is. We're still trying to tease that out a little bit more. Injury severity score is over 16. So the higher an injury severity score, the worse the patient's doing. Okay? So you look here, 24-hour mortality, 11% decrease, 48-hour, 16%, 28-day, 59%. That's pretty significant there. These numbers are less, though. It's a little bit interesting that those are less, but this number is extremely high. We're not 100% sure what that means. There is some, we are actually working on a paper that talks about injury severity scores, because you notice across hospitals, when we look at multiple counties and multiple trauma centers, the way you score somebody with an injury severity score is varied significantly based on the hospital and the physician that's actually doing it. So, what's that?
I think the reason you're seeing less of a difference is those patients are going to die no matter what you do. They're going to die at a higher rate.
The 24 and 48 hour patients, possibly, yes, sir. So we are actually looking at a paper that will look at injury severity scores and how injury severity scores are interpreted and how that affects trauma system across the board. My medical director is not me. So we had 2 thromboembolic events, which was not an increase over the control group. So there was no increase in thromboembolic events in the control group. But we had a young male patient who was a victim of a high-speed TC, multiple long bone fractures. About 40 hours after admission, he had a hemispheric ischemic stroke. So we actually looked to do further studies on his brain, but the family did a DNR on him and unplugged him before we could do that, and so we couldn't do any further studies. We don't believe because of the time frame that 40 hours is relevant to the TXA, but it's possible. Couldn't rule it out. So we had an elderly patient who received TXA following a high-speed TC, also multiple long bone fractures, had a small subdural hematoma. On day 2, presented with an ischemic stroke, which neurosurgery attributed to a fat emboli in the brain. So did not attribute it to TXA. That was it, 2. No DVT, no PE, no other MIs. The 2 strokes, they meet the same as a control group. Remember, these patients have a fairly high injury burden. So confounding or limiting factors. So what possibly is confusing us in the process that says that maybe TXA isn't doing what we think it is, right? So the prospective non-randomized cohort did not allow for the administration of TXA to be blinded. So this is not a blinded study. Everybody that was given TXA knew they were given TXA. The hospital, they got a band on their arm that said they got TXA. So the hospital knew they got TXA. Something that's not actually written here is that none of the hospitals in our study gave TXA prior to us doing the TXA study. They all included it in their massive transfusion protocol within 6 months of us starting the study. So there could be a confounding factor that we don't see here, but inability of some pre-hospital providers to accurately recognize signs and symptoms of hemorrhagic shock created some inclusion and exclusion criteria. We did have some patients that got TXA that weren't traumatic for any number of reasons. Interpretation's always funny, but So there was some patients that were excluded that should have been included, and some patients that were included that should have been excluded. So we didn't do any coagulation testing prior to TXA administration. So we had no pre-hospital point of coagulation testing. So the TAG or the ROTAM both test the blood and decide whether or not the patient needs more clotting factors. None of them are pre-hospital, by the way. And to be honest with you, we got the greatest pushback in all of this study from these folks. They don't want TXA in the field because once we give them TXA, the TAG and the ROTAM, both of them don't read clotting factors right. So they don't want us to move forward with TXA. So we got a big pushback at the end because they wanted it off the charts. They wanted those patients tested before they got TXA. Well, it was only done in the hospital, so it created somewhat of a problem for us. The reason actually the TXA is not statewide scope of practice in California, it's statewide optional scope of practice, is because of those folks. They pushed it at the state level until they finally said, we'll make it optional. And they agreed to it. So this is the final research paper we published in September, September of 18. So don't be confused if you look at the paper. If you go to the Western Journal of Emergency Medicine, there's two papers. There's one that we did about a year and a half ago, which was the initial study that showed no statistical significance, but showed improvement. And then this paper that we just published. So if you want to pull it down and read it, all of the statistical analysis, all of the studied, all the data stuff is in this paper, if you're a data geek. So, in conclusion, TXA decreased mortality, blood product used, ICU stay, hospital stay, with no increase in thromboembolic events. So, that's why we do it. So the number needed to treat in this study, the number for 28-day survivability, the number needed to treat, which is a statistical number. I can't say statistical. I shouldn't do lectures, I can't say a word. That says it's going to take X number of patients to treat them to get one life saved. So the number needed to treat here in TXA is 22. So 22 patients are going to have to get TXA before we save one life, right? Because that's all the patients, because we over triage patients, right? We give TXA to more patients than actually need it, because we can save lives. So TXA is somewhere between $20 a dose to $50 a dose, depending on where you get it, what country you're in. So let's say it's $50 a dose. So we're going to talk about cost per life saved, okay? Why do we talk about cost per life saved? That's kind of rude, right? You don't want to talk about how much money it costs to save a life. Actually, I do, right? Because he only gives me a finite bucket. He says, here's your bucket, go make it work. So I can't spend $1 million on a patient. I got to decide whether what we're doing is saving lives for the dollars he gives me. So what's the cost per life saved? So if you use an N number or a number needed to treat of 22 at $50 a vial, how much money is that? 1,100? 4,100. That's 1,100, right? 11. Yeah. Other way around, but you're close. So $1,100 to save a life. That's the question to you, is that worth it? Right, that's what's going to cost you an administered TXA to save one life. Well, what's an hour in ICU cost? What's the ED visit cost? Yeah, I'll take that every day. I'll take $1,100 to save a life. Every day. Every day. So throughout the state now, so this is statewide optional scope of practice, the drug's being given 40, 50, 100 times a day. So there's people walking and talking today that wouldn't have been walking and talking today if we hadn't done the study. And the same for tomorrow, and the same for the next day. So my question to you is really, how do you guys think outside the box, right? How do you think differently? How do you question what you're doing? How do you not continue to dump a bunch of fluid in a patient? How do you say, this isn't working? And just because these guys taught me this, just because everybody, my old medic partner said this is the way we do it, just because the protocol says this, maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe we should do something different. So that in a year, 2 years, 5 years, you guys are standing up here going, hey dude, you know that thing that you guys all do? It doesn't work. I need you to think differently. I need you to stop doing everything you're told and start questioning how you provide medicine. All right? Any questions? I think my, yeah.
Are you guys starting to use it in like severe GI bleed type cases outside of trauma?
So we are not, and relatively soon. So we just published the paper. We just got a statewide scope practice, optional scope practice 2 months ago. So the protocol got a lot more lenient now, right? There's a lot less inclusion and exclusion criteria, so we can use it a lot more. And then so what's going to happen is this is going to be, well, this is the pendulum, right? We're going to overuse it, right? And then because we weren't using it all, right? So we're not using it. Now we're going to overuse it, and eventually we'll find the sweet spot. But I think there's some good data that GI bleed, pregnancy or delivery complications, some other closed system bleeding, that it could be quite beneficial. Other questions? Nope. You sure? Oh, I'm sorry.
Does it decrease the ability to do organ donations?
No, not at all. Because we're not seeing clots in other places.
Could you
right?
repeat the question?
She asked if it decreases the ability to do organ donation. And so we're not seeing clots in other places. We're not seeing clots in organs that aren't having issues, that are not already damaged in the trauma. So no, across the board we haven't seen any of that. Other questions? All right. If you have any questions or concerns, or you want to shoot me an email, that's my email and my phone number. Give me a call, and I'll be here obviously today and tomorrow.
Why'd you put my phone number up there?
Yeah, I put his personal home phone number on there.
You guys, I think we're going to take 5 minutes. I know it's tough right after lunch. Get everybody up, move around a little bit, and then we'll start into our last presentation for the day. Hey guys, thanks for hanging with us. We're about to start our last session. We're going to have 2 presenters. Lieutenant Paul Stark from Gig Harbor Fire Department, and then our friend Joe Powell is going to be providing some color commentary on this one as well.
Don't say color commentary for Joe.
Very, you're right.
All right, well, thank you. So I think I was the last one to commit. That's I got asked a few weeks ago, and I kind of stalled and drug my feet a little bit, so that must be why I got stuck presenting last. So a couple things. So my name is Paul Stark. I'm a lieutenant with Gig Harbor Fire. I'm also the C-Shift Medical Services Officer. So my job is to run the EMS side of the house. I'm assigned a 24-hour shift. Any EMS-related event is mine. I work for the battalion chief. I still fight fires and do the same job. So I haven't, my job is to gather statistics. I'm going to cover some things, not many. I'm not a big statistic guy, and I don't have the time to sit and rifle through a lot of papers to present a lot of statistics for you. So I'll talk about that here in just a minute. Quick disclosure, I do not work for Zoll. I am not employed by Zoll. I do not own stock in Zoll. I'm here because Amy, our rep, is very good to us and asked me if I'd come down and present. So I call Amy all the time. Amy, how do I log in? How do I turn my machine on? Where's my boot? Help me out. So she's been very good to us, so I certainly am happy to come here and present. So I'm going to show you some of our live data, some of our a couple of our cases. So please keep in mind this is a QA session a little bit, so please don't judge us too harshly. But hopefully you can learn from ours. I'm going to share with you kind of our journey about kind of how we got to where we're at. We're on a similar path as Rialto. We've stolen some of their stuff. We've stolen stuff from different parts of the country, and so we'll kind of share with you how we got to where we are. So Gig Harbor, just some background information here. We're a suburb of Tacoma, Washington, just a couple miles north. 54 square miles, 48,000 people. We run about 6,000 calls a year. We've got a minimum of 17 on per day. We run 3 medic units, medic EMT, 4 engines with 2 on and 2 on rescue in a battalion. So I put about 40 cardiac arrests a year into the CARES database, so we are not statistically significant in the CARES data. We're a rather affluent area. As a result of that, we have 37 medical facilities in our district. and those range from 6 to 600 bed facilities. I'm talking about assisted living facilities. The largest one just opened up 2 years ago, 600 beds. That starts out independent living facility, transitions to assisted living, and transitioned into full care and memory care facilities. Those surprisingly don't generate a ton of, that one doesn't generate a ton of calls because you have to be able to show almost $1 million in assets before you get into that. But as I'm sure a lot of you know, all the 6-bed facilities, you go to some of them all the time. So that being said, a lot of our cardiac arrests come out of those facilities. About 60-ish%, 60 to 65% of our cardiac arrests are at assisted living facilities. The patients are extremes in age. They already have a litany of medical conditions, and so and they're in asystole, and they were unwitnessed, because if you've ever been into those facilities, which most of us have, of course, the last time they saw the patient, 15 minutes ago, they were talking to me, they were great. The reality is we have no idea how long they've been down. So we're starting in asystole, and we really have no idea. So that being said, when we talk about statistics, we get asked, our medical or our physician advisor asks all the time, hey, what's our Oosting scores? What is our statistics? I don't know. Like I shared with you, I still have to train to put hose on the ground, throw ladders, train ACLS, and train the medics. We don't have the resources to collect a lot of the data, so I don't have those. We do put the stuff in put information into the Oosting, into the cares, and get our Oosting scores, but the reality is we only have about 4 to 7 patients a year that actually fall into the Oosting criteria, if you're familiar with that. So that can vary. We have 2 patients that walk out of the hospital in a year. We had a 30% save rate. We may have, if we only have 4 that met that criteria and none of them walk out of the hospital, we only have a 0% save rate. So that being said, I don't put a lot of stock. I'm not going to give you a lot more statistics than that because I don't put a lot of stock in them. I'm a field operator like a lot of you. That's the administration wants that, and I understand we need that to know where we started so we can know if what we're doing is improving. But the reality is, from where I sit, it's not particularly helpful and beneficial to me working with the line crews. So our journey began a couple of years ago. We ended up changing. We went to Zoll. I told you I'm not a sales rep, but I'll probably sound like one a little bit. We switched from physio. We were longtime physio people. We switched over to Zoll. One of the primary reasons we switched over to Zoll was the CPR feedback. We'll talk about that in just a minute. You'll get a chance to do it tomorrow. I think you'll be a believer once you have a chance to see it and do it. And we're going to show you some of the statistics about, or not statistics, we're going to show you how you can take that information, push it to the cloud, and critique it afterwards. So one of the things that we did, we developed a CPR IEP, which basically boils down to tool and job assignments. So in brief, the first aid medic unit gets there, again, medic EMT, they move the patient to the floor, the EMT starts compressions. The medic throws the pads on, drops an eye gel, a supraglottic airway, runs around, sticks an IO in, gives a round of epi. If they're on their game, that's been about 2 minutes. Put some passive oxygenation on them. Then they may switch out. Hopefully about that time, the engine crew arrives, put them on the auto pulse. Within about 2 minutes, the patient's on the auto pulse, they have an airway, and now we're just sitting there having a nice little cup of coffee, going, okay, every 5 minutes, somebody's breathing for the patient, every couple of seconds, and then and we're pushing every epi every 5 minutes. Apparently that's not the right thing to do anymore, but we'll revisit that. So that has freed up, by using that CPR IEP, we have changed a lot of the issues that you often have when you start cross-pollinating shifts. You've got guys coming in on overtime or whatever. It makes it very clear. Everybody understands their jobs, their roles, and it's amazing how it has revolutionized the way we run a cardiac arrest. They actually run pretty much the same way all the time. It also allows us, once the auto pulse is going, it allows us to actually have those conversations about the H's and T's that we're looking for. We can have a calm conversation. Okay, now, are we dealing with hypoxia here? No, probably not. This was a witness cardiac arrest. Okay, is there a trauma component to this? No, this is probably not trauma. Okay, what a PE? Is there a possibility? Oh, I don't know. Let me go get the history and find out about this. Dig through the history. Yep. Hey, look at this. They have a history of AFib. Oh, maybe this is a PE. Maybe that's what we're dealing with. So those conversations have not always been, you know how chaotic a cardiac arrest can be. And people are looking at the monitor, and particularly in our system where you only often you're the only medic on the scene. I've got to get this patient tubed. I got to make sure I'm watching the monitor. I got to make sure that these guys are doing cardiac compressions well. Is their rate good? Is their depth good? We've taken a lot of that out of the equation. So let's say Gig Harbor, we have 5 stations that we staff. Beautiful area. What are we looking for in cardiac arrest? Sorry, somebody else built this for me, so I'm not sure where they're going with that. So our real-time feedback. So again, you'll get a chance to see this tomorrow. It's fantastic. So what we're looking at, one of the first things we look at, when you look at the monitor, we flip the monitor so that whoever's doing compressions can see it. So what we're looking at, first thing we've taught our guys is right here. This is your compression depth. Tell the guys real simple, hey, make sure you're in the green. Push hard enough that you're in the green. And now as a medic, the guys are looking at that. I don't need to worry about it anymore. The EMT standing next to the guy doing compressions is looking at that going, hey, you're not in the green anymore. You're not pushing hard enough. Same with the rate right next to it. You've got the rate right here. Hey, you're not in the green. You're not pushing fast enough. You're not between 100 to 120. You're not 2 inches to 2.4 inches. The CPR feedback is fantastic. So there's what I was just talking about, the depth and the rate. The velocity and recoil, something we look at too. Remember, we got to come off the chest, right? Got to come all the way off the chest to make sure we get that full recoil, so we're getting the blood coming back into the chest. The perfusion indicator, this is a neat little trick. Again, you'll get to see this. I'll explain it briefly. Remember, we're all taught that because of the pressures within the chest, we need to make sure that the coronary arteries can fill up with blood, right? That's why we got to come off the chest, and a lot of the science that's come out that's talked about that. This is just a visual indicator that tells you, okay, when you do compressions for 20 to 30 seconds, you'll notice that diamond go from this to this. As a visual, that tells you, look, the coronary arteries have filled up with blood. You've got your pump is full. You're doing great now. When you stop doing compressions, after about 3-4 seconds, that starts going down, and that's telling you, hey, you haven't primed your pump again. You've lost the prime on your pump. You got to get back on there and do compressions again to keep that pump, keep that heart full of blood, make it more receptive to defibrillation, right? Make sense so far? So we run a cardiac arrest, and afterwards we can take and we can push that case to the cloud. We push that case to the cloud. Now, I as supervisor, I can go in and I can pull up this CPR report card. We'll show you a live one here in just a minute. There's a ton of information on here. There's a couple of things that I can look at that I can show to the crews that just worked this cardiac arrest in real time. They can see what happened. The first thing I'm looking at is right here. And what I'm looking at is these compressions right here, manual compressions, those are within depth. Good job, guys. I can look at a lot of this consistency here and going, this is an autopulse, which we'll get to here in just a second. But there's a gap right here. And what's the hallmark of what Chief said this morning? What's the first thing in the CPR toolbox? Constant, uninterrupted CPR. This has been the biggest challenge that I've had in doing QA. But this has been the best tool because I can look at it and go, there's a gap there, guys. Why was there a gap there? We can sit down an hour after this cardiac arrest went on. Guys can see it. It's right there, undeniable. There was a gap there. What happened? So we can sit down with the 2 engines, the medic crew, the battalion chief, everybody that was there and go, what happened? It's fresh in everybody's mind. We've been very deliberate, as the chief said again as well. It's a safe environment here. You're not going to be disciplined. We're all going to learn. So we had a lot of gaps like that. And those have slowly gone down, but, and I'll talk about here in just a minute, Zola's improved the program in the last 2 years, or last year, to show where now I can go and review the ECG and I can look at that and find out, oh, you know why they stopped doing CPR there? Because they got ROSC back. I can look at the rhythm and go, hey, that's awesome. It's a clearly discernible rhythm, assuming they had a pulse with it, because that's what the crews would have done. Or I can find out, before we had the auto pulse, I can find out that, oh, well, you know what? They were moving the patient downstairs. So we've had a lot of good, meaningful conversations. It's getting to the point now we've reviewed enough of these in this forum with the report card up there. All I got to do is say, okay, first in crew, what'd you have? They start talking. So the post-incident critiques have been exceptional. A lot of good learning going on. Everybody's throwing in how they did, why they did, what they did. A lot of great learning has taken place. So 2 years ago, we get the auto pulse. Now I'm going to sound like a salesman. It's been fantastic. A couple of different out there. The Lucas, the auto pulse. We went with the auto pulse. We had already been involved with the Zoll, so we went with the auto pulse. We didn't do a lot of studies. We had talked to a number of people, some of the guys down in San Francisco, and talked about, because they had some auto pulse and some Lucas, we went with the auto pulse. Pauses have been killing me. Why are we having pauses even with the auto pulse? Why are we stopping the auto pulse? We've slowly improved that, but another thing you look at, and we'll keep this is one of the big things. How many pauses? This tells us, you know what? I'll leave that for when Joe comes up. He can talk a little bit more about that. One of the things that we've learned on ours is. Again, where I don't put a lot of credence in data because there's a tremendous amount of information here, but one of the biggest mistakes we've made is that, well, not mistake, but one of the things that happens commonly is you run a cardiac arrest, you take it into the hospital, the monitor comes off the patient, monitor goes out to the medic unit, sits in the medic unit for 15 minutes before it gets shut off. The monitor reads that as there's 15 minutes of asystole going on here, you're not doing compressions. So the program allows you to edit that, but again, we have just gotten into this. I'm just getting into learning how to edit this and increase our data. That's another reason why I don't have a lot of data for you, and I don't put a lot of credence in it, because as you well know, if you don't put good data in, you don't get good data out. So again, don't ask me for our survival numbers. I don't have them. So the velocity. Again, how quickly you're coming off the chest. Again, just good information to critique guys' CPR post-arrest. So after retraining, after showing guys, reviewing this for about 2 years, now we can look and you will see there's less gaps across the top there. Part of that is the gaps, guys are pausing the machine less. They're realizing, Chief showed earlier today, he said 4.9 seconds was their average or the longest pause. So there's a lot of components to that toolbox. That's the number one thing. I got to fix that first. Once I fix that, then I'll start dealing with the other issues in that toolbox down the line, but that was the number one thing. So another thing that's interesting, again, I'm going to sound like a sales rep for a minute. One of the things you'll notice here about the auto pulse in particular, what we found early on is you have to understand there's a puck on there. If you're not familiar with it, Again, you'll see it tomorrow. There's a puck sitting on the chest. That's what you're pushing on. I believe there's accelerometers, is that right? Accelerometers in there that are reading this depth. When you put the autopulse on there, you're no longer pushing on it. But what we found is over time, every time you pause the autopulse and restart it, it recalibrates itself. And so it gets more down into the normal range. The really cool part about it was we found is, it doesn't show up on this. It's at the very bottom. You see those little dots along the bottom. On another one, we'll show you, that's the end-tidal CO2. And what we found is every time you would reset that, the autopulse would come back into range and our end-tidal CO2 levels were going up. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Oh, here we go. So you can see down at the bottom, right here. So again, they talked about, and you'll get more of it tomorrow, the science of the end-tidal CO2 and how important it is. So being able to look at that, and is this our case? No, we'll get to the other one here in a minute. Again, it's just giving you more information about how your cardiac arrest, did you make some of the right decisions, when to terminate, when to not. So this was a case. This is another perk of this. This was a case that we had. Just a couple of things to point out here. Three shocks were given. You can see this is what I was talking about earlier. So this was put on the patient. Some manual CPR was done right here. The autopulse was put on, quick pause. Every time they paused, it recalibrated and then eventually got back into range. The end-tidal CO2 isn't on this. Again, we'll show this case live. So we talked about, it's not all about critiquing the cases and telling the crews what they did wrong. As you look at this case, there's minimal pauses. The crews did a really great job. As this, when you look at the rest of this, the end-tidal CO2, you'll see that the end-tidal CO2 levels came back and then eventually dropped off. So when we're doing critiques, it doesn't always have to be negative. I can look at this. This was an 8-year-old girl that spent 8 minutes underwater. And she ended up not making it. But what I can do is I can show this to the crews and go, look, guys, you did everything you could. It's great. You minimized the pauses here. They read through the report. They did a great job with the airway. What it showed is throughout the transport, the end-tidal CO2 levels continuing to fall. Wasn't, they're ventilating this as a respiratory arrest, but so it was nice to be able to look at the two medics that were on this and go, you know what, guys, that's awesome. You did a great job. Minimal interruptions. This young lady was on her way out. It had nothing to do with what we did. You did a great job, guys. So it doesn't always have to be a negative. You can certainly pull out the positives that we did and say, look, this is a great thing. So this is just another case I put up. So this is the number. This is one of the things that we look at and go, okay, that is an example of how many times, how much your compression to pause ratio. Again, and this is why I don't put a lot of stock into this, because what this did, I haven't trained our guys yet. Look, you've got to help me out with the data that goes into this. You've got to shut the machine off as soon as you take it off the patient, because you can look at this, take a lot of this with a grain of salt, because the other problem with this is when you look at a scorecard like this, let me jump up. Yeah, we'll come back to playback here in a minute. When you look at the scorecard, you don't know whether that was an 8-year-old girl or an 80-year-old patient. You don't know whether this occurred inside, outside. You don't know a lot of information about the code, so you can't put a lot of stock. It's just one piece of the critique puzzle. Does that make sense to everybody? Right. So one of the other features that was added within the last year, and our Zoll rep showed this to me just a few weeks ago. These pauses, as I was telling you, these pauses right here, these pauses were killing me. Kept talking to guys. Again, I'm like, interrupted CPR. Why was it interrupted? Now what I can do with this new feature, the playback, is I can look back at that and I can play that EKG rhythm along and I can go, awesome, there was an organized rhythm there. Beautiful organized rhythm. That explains some of the pauses. So before I jump on guys and go, 3 years, guys, 3 years, I've been pounding on you about pauses. We can't have these pauses. I can look and go, huh, awesome, organized rhythm. Great job, guys, you're beginning to get ROSC back. That's one of the biggest things that we have seen, that I can tell you I've seen, is that we're getting more ROSC back than we ever have. And so, trend report, get great information. When you push all these cases up to the cloud, it starts gathering all this information and taking and go, okay, we can look at our pauses and go, hey, look, 3 years ago, our pauses were 20, 30 seconds. Now they're 8, 12 seconds. So the trending, you can break it up by year, quarter, month, however you want to do it. It's beneficial. You can look at our numbers there and go, all right, well, something's amiss there. We've got an outlier out there that's just blowing up our statistics right now. But like I told it, you can't tell from the scorecard, is this a male, female? Are they 100 pounds? Are they 350 pounds? Or the inside, outside? We don't know. So a couple of stories that we had. One of our first patients was a 6'5", 22-year-old, 350-pound kid whose parents were whose dad and uncle were GUI duck divers. So this kid just gets out of dive training, like scuba training, like basic scuba training. They put him in the gear, they send him down 30 feet. They see some bubbles for a little bit, and then they don't see bubbles. They pull the kid up, he's in cardiac arrest. To get to this kid, we had to go down about 200 feet, narrow wooden steps about that wide, with gravel and dirt and ivy on both sides of it, cross the beach, up on a gangplank that was about the same width, up to a barge to get this kid. So we go down there, and this is like the first time a couple of our medics had used the autopulse. Put this kid on the autopulse, continuous CPR. I wasn't on the call, the guys are just describing this nightmare of dragging this 350-pound kid up this crazy embankment. You see in Gig Harbor, we've got 116 miles of coastline. So all of our waterfront homes, you go down a nasty, windy driveway to the garage, and that's where you park. Then you go down some, who knows what kind of ramp, steps, whatever, down to the house. So here, and of course they're upstairs. So we can put them on the autopulse, we can take them down the stairs, we can bring them up to the medic unit, which, as you know, there's no way you're gonna do that. There's no way you're gonna do CPR without having some kind of a mechanical device. So, and again, that's one of the main hallmarks of the toolbox and all the other research that we've done. That's the number one thing, continuous CPR. They'll talk about, this is in resuscitation centers. I think you'll hear more about that tomorrow. Just the idea being is there's been pushback from the cath lab. There was a study, I don't know, some of you might be able to help me out. There was a study that came out from Europe about 2-3 years ago, I think. Maybe it's come out a long time ago. I heard about it a couple of years ago, about like 79% of out-of-hospital cardiac arrests are caused by a clot. And so VFib arrests were a clot. And so grab your patient if they're in coarse VFib, get them on the autopulse, get them to the cath lab, and so hopefully they can relieve the lesion. So, and it increases survivability. So that's what this was about, is you can take this into, we've had some pushback from the hospitals in the area. They're not wanting to take these patients, and so with some education, it's still an ongoing battle. Resuscitation centers, again, going to talk about that tomorrow. Any questions? Awesome. Like I said, I don't have a lot of statistics for you, but I can tell you what I've seen. what we've done and how our journey went. It certainly has been a journey. We've got the last part of the toolbox that we have not done is the 30-degree increasing, but it's a minor training issue. So, sir.
What's the rate that you guys compress at with the water pulse?
It's preset to.
Is it 80?
Was it 80? Okay.
That's what I thought I'd heard.
Mm-hmm. You can change the parameters if you want. It's preset.
Now, it will show in your data, it will show the compression fractions off, right? It will show your rate's only 80. So with the new updated software, for everybody.
Yeah. So
3.211.
Audible says a different compression, that's why it wants to 80 compressions per minute. Because the circumferential speed around the entire thoracic cavity rather than external. So when we do manual compression, 100, 120, 2 to 2.4 inches, you gotta stay within those guidelines. This operates differently. What we have done is we have integrated software into our exteriors equipment. So when you get that real-time feedback, with our advanced manual that shows you, once you put the auto pulse on, it shows auto pulse on the screen. And then, so you won't get a different type of feedback. Again, you know your pad placement is right, because you know it's working. So secondarily, on the back end of case review, which all you'll see in the future, Joe, you guys will see in the future, you kind of see a clean cut log with the auto pulse was running. You won't see that difference on your CPR report card. But today you can adjust it. I think the biggest thing, to Joe's point, to Paul's point, is to not interrupt your CPR time. So that's really what they're truly looking for today, and that will show.
Well, could you go back to the CPR report card?
That's I was trying to bring up the live case.
Could you use the microphone?
Yep, this one?
Or whoever's going to speak.
Sure. Try and bring up a live case so you can see some of the different, not see it, our particular 8-year-old kind of all together as a case.
You hear me? Can you see me? No. Too tall. It's too tall. I'm not too short. So when you look at this, just put it this way. When you look at this, before you look at this, and you're doing CPR on a patient, what do you know about the quality of CPR? What do you know about the depth? What do you know about the rate? What do you know about end-tidal CO2? What do you know about saturation? After the call's over. 0, right? Without getting real feedback and real data. I mean, that's real data, right? So that's not what some paramedic put in, and I am one, so don't take it personally. It's not what a paramedic put in that probably meets a protocol that didn't actually happen, that he decided to happen 30, 40 minutes later. What time? This is real. This is actual stuff happening in real time. So what is this? That's what I wanted before. Did you get the report card, right? Did it say CPR report card?
I don't remember where it was.
Go back for me. So the difference between having real live data and exactly what happened and having no data is night and day. It's riding a horse to a call or taking an ambulance to a call. So
I'm not sure where it was.
Okay, is it back here? What was it first?
There.
Right there. So what does this tell you? Just look at this quickly and say, kind of, what does this tell you right off the top, right? So here you see that these compressions are not necessarily,
No, you're good.
These are manual compressions. They're not necessarily the proper depth, right? Which if you look at manual compressions, every time we've not been able to find anybody that can show us manual compressions, proper depth, proper rate, proper recoil, right? So we know this almost never happens with manual compressions. So this is manual compressions here. You see a little bit of a pause there. You see these bigger pauses here. The auto pulse, I believe this is auto pulse start working here. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. It could be.
Could be, or it could be the compressor change, right? Yep. Then you have this pause. See this pause here? And then the auto pulse working. You got a pause right there, got a pause right there, a couple little pauses. More than likely these are rhythm checks, I'm guessing, right? If I had to,
yep, pulse checks.
Right off the top of my head, right? And then you can look at the rate here. You can see these pauses, wrong rate, and all the way across. You can actually look at the real-time data. This is compression of target, right? This has Next slide. So this will give you a pause, compression fraction pauses. Now, what Paul's talking about is that if you don't turn the monitor off, it will show, actually some of those times it will show that the monitor keeps running and there's no compression fraction going on.
It skews the data.
You can edit that data, right? So you can edit those cases so that the data will look appropriate to your patient care. So whether you terminated at the hospital or the patient got ROS back, you can edit that data so that will look better for you. But this is, I'm getting old, what is that, 90-second pause, 31-second pause, and a 27-second pause? Here, right?
With the playback, I can now go back and I can look and go, was there an organized rhythm during that pause? And I can do that if I don't have the crew available. If I'm critiquing this a week later because I wasn't around or wasn't on, I can look at it and go, oh, hey, look, they got a pulse back. So then I can double check on their report, read through their narrative. Yep, sure enough, they got ROSC. That's why they decided to transport. Awesome. Didn't stick around, but they got it. Or I can look at it and go, you know what, there's nothing going on. I need to have a conversation with the guys on scene. Maybe they were moving. Maybe they had, who knows? Who knows what happened? Something happened.
Yeah, so these are fairly significant pauses. Go ahead, sir.
So you're saying it's not just looking at organized rhythm, it can detect the patient's pulse or heartbeat?
No, it can.
Because you mentioned a few times during a pause you'd see an organized rhythm and then you were okay with that. I just wanted to clarify.
No, you have to assume that the guys are checking pulses.
Okay.
I mean, we've gone through a whole, again, it's been an evolution. Doing pulse checks. Everybody's, whether we're doing manual or whatever, or auto pulse, checking pulse. We have a good pulse with compressions. Yes, okay. The other thing that the X series does is you can see an underlying rhythm. You have to learn to kind of take that, not take it. You have to learn to kind of look at it and go, because if you look at it at a glance, it looks like fib every time, because when they're doing CPR. But when you learn to kind of decipher it a little bit and go, okay, you know what? I don't need to do a pulse check right now or a rhythm check, because I can see that this is just plain CPR, as opposed to fib where I need to defibrillate it. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to be checking pulses. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So, and then follow up is the pulse check every 2 minutes. AHA guideline, is that out the window with this? You just are checking pulses when you think you might have ROSC, you see an organized rhythm. How do you manage that?
My opinion is, as Chief alluded to earlier, you know what? The AHA guidelines are great, and we certainly follow them. But there are times when I can take all the information that I have and look at the underlying rhythm, and then I can look at the patient and what is happening with the code. We may wait a little bit longer.
So, and so just from our perspective and our perspective, we don't do pulse checks, right? Only with a significant spike in entitled CO2 do we do a pulse check, and we don't necessarily do that, right? We'll also look at blood pressure and saturation, entitled CO2 spike, and then if we see a nice spike in entitled CO2, and Jeremiah might be able to jump in here, but we'll wait for another couple minutes, right? We'll take the pressure, and we'll see if there's a significant change in the blood pressure, and that entitled CO2 stays high. We'll let the auto pulse run, right? We want to prime the pump, right? Because you guys have all done it, right? You guys have all had a cardiac arrest. You got a pulse back, you stop CPR, and they coded 2 minutes later, right? The pump's not primed, so we won't do pulse checks. We have struggled a tiny bit with people that have really high entitled CO2s, 60, 70, 80, that don't show that spike when they get a pulse back, and we're not sure what to do with it, nor are we 100% sure what the cause of those really high entitled CO2s are. We're trying to work through that, but that's it's a good problem to have, right? But the blood pressure cuff may be a way for us to know whether or not they have a pulse in those high entitled CO2 patients. We also will see when you have data, when you have real data, you can look at the data, and you'll see at the moment of ROS, we have a momentary decrease in saturation, right? Because so all of the cells are going, well, hey, I need oxygen. I'm alive again. I need to do something. And so sats drop a little bit. It's not significant enough for us to say that's a pulse, but it is a sign for us to kind of say, okay, maybe that's a pulse. But stopping to do pulse checks, for that matter, stopping to do rhythm checks, not something we do very often. The only time we'll do a rhythm, we do have see-through CPR, like Paul has, right? And my guys learn to read through what's going on there, especially if you put the pads in the right location. You put the pads here, see-through CPR looks a ton better than you put the pads here, right? Because the band's not compressing on the chest, on the pad. The pads are here. So the see-through CPR works better. I have no idea where I was going.
It's all good.
We'll show you tomorrow that if you want to do a pulse check or a rhythm check, you can do it in 1.5 seconds or less. And all you have to do is push print to start with, and then you can look at the printed out thing for as long as you want. I don't care, as long as auto pulse is going right back on. So even if you need to do it in your system, there's a way to do it and minimize the cost.
Yeah, so
But we would not advocate for
if
it.
end-tidal CO2 is below 20, I don't need to check a rhythm. If they don't have a pulse, end-tidal CO2 is below 20, I'm not going to defibrillate it. I don't give a shit. I don't care. Right?
So much editing.
Sorry. so I don't care. If the end-tidal CO2 is over 20 and we can't determine whether the underlying rhythm is fib or not, we just pause for a second and a half, run a strip. Because all I need to know, the only thing, I don't need to know whether the PR interval is great, the QRS is wider than this, if it's a, the only thing I need to know is it VFib or not? Is it coarse VFib? So I only need a second. Yep, that's VFib or that's not. So we only pause the auto pulse for a second and a half, 2 seconds when we do that.
Sorry.
No, it's good.
And this is not picking on you
No, it's all right.
at all, but what key, and maybe you addressed this, apologize if you already did, but what is keeping you from implementing fully what Rialto is doing, the full toolbox?
Just, it's been a journey. And it started out very slow, and I mean, we're there. This is the last stop in the line, is getting all the science. So once I can understand the science, so I can, again, I'm here learning just like you guys are. Most of it, our physician advisor shared most of it with the crews. Most of the guys know it. Now it's just a matter of implementing it. And so this was the final stop to go, okay, now I understand it, now I can teach it to the crews, teach it to the EMTs as well. Because so much of this is as they talked about earlier, is BLS. And it's making the job of our, because we only run typically with one medic, the medic doesn't need to intubate anymore. The medic doesn't need to watch compressions rate and depth anymore. The medic doesn't, they're just, hey, pushing an epi and keeping an eye on the monitor, watching the underlying rhythm. So, I mean, it's really making it much more manageable, much more reasonable, much more comfortable for the medic. So, sorry.
Once you guys get Ross, what's your process? I mean, this is for both of you. So you get Ross, they're already on the gurney with the auto pulse on. You get Ross, and what's your process? I mean, I know we're trying to stay away from giving any medications. You guys just doing a 12 lead and going, or just shipping right away?
Yeah, we're transporting. I mean, we're transporting, and yep, get a 12 lead, absolutely. Call them up, and off we go.
You're not sitting on scene for any length of time. You guys are going.
Yep. As soon as we get Rosk, we're starting to move towards the hospital.
We'll leave them on the auto pulse, right? We'll leave, not the auto pulse running. We'll pull the bands off, right? Put them next to them in case they recode. We don't want to during transport. I'd try to put the auto pulse back on.
Yep.
So we'll leave them on the auto pulse. We'll do a 12 lead, and then we'll head to the standing center. All of our ROS go to standing centers, of course, because most of them are occlusions, right?
Yep.
Sorry.
No, course fib too is the same. Course fib, load them up, and we're leaving.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
But at that time, they're already on the gurney and packaged pretty much. Is that why you're doing?
We haven't done that yet.
Okay.
We have Fresno cots. The cots themselves they're power cots. They weigh 200 pounds. It's a great. That's why I'm here to learn as well from you guys tomorrow too, because I'm kind of going. We're not going to take our cots into the house. It's not going to happen. And so we don't do it now. And so I'm kind of going, okay, drug box trick. Hey, that's a good one. I'm going to have to remember that one. Yeah, I'm hoping to learn too, to kind of go, okay, let's see how creative Rialto is about getting them up at 30 degrees. That's the last thing that we haven't done yet, but we will. As soon as I get back, policy will change and we'll do it.
Jeremiah has all the tricks to get them at 30 degrees, of course, but our patients are all packaged, right? So they're on a gurney. We intubate on the gurney. We put them heads up on the gurney, so it's all the package, right? This is the most obvious thing that I never thought of in my entire life until Chief Grayson came to Rialto Fire and said, hey, why are you intubating them on the ground? I'm like, why? What did I say? That's how we've always done it, right? Of course. And once you put them on the gurney, get off your belly and intubate them on the gurney. Huh. Well, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Address this question. The reason I'm also a medic in Pierce County for Paul is the reason for the load and go on the refractory BFib is to get them to the cath lab.
Right.
And initially, one of the cath labs agreed to do caths with the autopulse running, and now we're having an issue with it, so it hasn't happened yet. But that's the goal, is to get them there.
But we're still loading them up and we're taking them. The hospital can explain their actions. We've done what is in the best interest of the patient. We got them to the cath lab.
Yeah, we're struggling with the same thing, right? We can't get a cath lab to buy off on taking them under mechanical CPR in the cath lab. So if you get a patient with great end-tidal CO2s on a very long downtime, they have refractory VFib, that patient's, and maybe they're gasping, right? So they have huge opportunity to walk out of the hospital, and we take them to the local ER, which a lot of times will do what? Lay them flat, take them off the rescue pod, take them off the auto pulse, do manual CPR, and call them in 10 minutes, right? That guy's got survivability, right? So it's actually killing me, as Paul says, it's killing me, right? Because literally we take those patients and they're dead, they call them.
Anything else? Awesome. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.